Hello everybody, I'm InTheLittleWood, also known as Martin, and welcome back to the channel. So today, we're going to be diving into the Building with Blocks blog post, which was recently published on Hytale.com to see what they've got on offer for us creative types. So from the outset, they make mention of the Hytale Model Maker, and how we can use it to create various different block types, and a little bit later on we get to see a demonstration of that. But to make this easier to consume, they decided that for this post, much like the last one, they're going to focus on Zone 1, the Emerald Grove. And we begin with this shot of 4 different kinds of stone blocks lined alongside one another, and I wasn't entirely sure if these were going to be stone until I read the sentence beneath it, because they're kind of darker and a bit more of a green tint compared to the usual stone colours that we see. Like, have a little look at this clip in the trailer right here, and even in the background of the very same shot from these 4 blocks, you can see the stone is much lighter. So that immediately flags up the question of when we're crafting these variants, can we dye them into certain colours? There are a few methods that spring to mind for this. We could do the traditional Minecraft thing like the wool variants, where we just introduce a different item in to change the colour and the tone. Maybe the option will be completely free, so we'll just have a random menu of lots of different types. Or there could be an equivalent in adventure mode of an item that works similarly to the RGB tweaking that we can do inside a creative mode. Who knows? Scrolling down the page though, and we do see that there is another stone variant that's a little bit lighter, but I wouldn't say it's fair enough to be considered sandstone. Maybe limestone, but I'm not too sure. So maybe the alternative is when you craft them, there will be kind of like 5 menus of stone variants, and you can just use the one same stone piece to create all of them. Although we definitely shouldn't forget about the mention in the World Gem post about how different locations are going to have different colour variants on various blocks, furniture and stuff like that inside of that zone. Although for me that was more sort of centred around, I guess, like the wood and also like, you know, benches and chairs and tables and stuff, not necessarily stone. And what's pretty cool about this is that this isn't actually the first time that we've seen these varied stone styles. You might remember back in the day when the game first got revealed, inside of the concept art, there was one for challenge dungeons or the entrances to them. And actually over here you can see how there are different stone types with various different carvings and things etched into them, depending on which zone they reside in, to make the portal look a bit more homely. I just think it's quite cool to see something that was concept art then turned into the real thing. I always get a good kick out of that. Now, it wouldn't be outrageous to guess that there might be some kind of special workbench to make all of this happen. So it's a workbench that you would specifically throw regular stone into, and then you can choose what kind of variation you would like out of it. Although the wording in the post makes me think differently, because it says, the crafting system, however, lets you create many different building materials from the same basic block type. So could this be enabled by default? If so, perfect. It'll mean that our first night when we're inside of the game and we're having to build a hut to save ourselves from the monsters is actually going to look really decorative and really pretty. Next up, we've got a demonstration piece showing off most of, if not the entire collection, of stone forms that we can create. So we've already addressed the normal blocks, so they're kind of out of the way. And then if we were to cut those in half, of course, we would have slabs, which as you can see, can also be carved into various different styles, although it does seem in this picture as though there are 2 styles still left to remain, so fingers crossed we can do all of them. And whilst we're on the topic of slabs as well, the very next piece of information addresses specifically those blocks and how you can place them. So this clip here shows off how you can place slabs on any face of a block, which is great. So you can fill the upper or the lower half horizontally as you normally could, but then you can also now place them vertically. So you can fill either left or right side of a block, so you can basically fill out these areas exactly how you want. And from what I've seen on Twitter already as well, the response to vertical slab placement, very highly praised, so good job Hytale. Next, we can see that there are stair pieces, and this image right here just shows how versatile they can be. Quite similarly to Minecraft, they have that same sort of smart mechanic where, depending on where you place the blocks in relation to one another, staircases specifically, they will actually form into various different shapes. So you can have an entire circle of outer ones, so it's opening out the staircase to the masses, or you can do it on the inside, so it almost kind of encloses it off, and you can make those small little paddling pools. Next up, we have got beams. So these are simple rectangular blocks that align themselves with the center of the block that's next to them. And basically, I think people will use these more so for the visual aspect than they will for the sort of physical collision box aspect. So you can use them to make structures look as though they've got support and other things like that. So these beams are going to be a really nice detailer to have in your arsenal if you're a creative builder. And what's even better about them as well is they seem to be extended into a few different block types. So we're talking stone, wood, and even that lighter type of stone as well. And off the end of that sentence, and loads of other ones that I say in these videos as well, I always want to go like, oh, well, I hope they have them for every type of block in the game. game, but the truth of the matter is, if they don't, it's going to be like a 3-minute job in the model maker to create it, isn't it? I really can't stress how powerful of a tool I think the model maker is going to be in terms of creativity and opening up the game to the masses. So the first day is done, you've created your house to get through the first night, and it looks really pretty. Now you want to throw up a fence to stop all those pesky kids getting on your front garden. And this can very easily be done with wall blocks. So these are looking great at the moment. You can use them to trim a garden, maybe even have a high tower and you have it around the balcony to stop people from falling off. And it seems as though they come in a few different styles as well. Not only in terms of their material, but also the physical shape of them as well. So if you look at this one right here, you'll notice that you've got the sort of beam on the top, then you've got the pillars that go down to the floor and they connect directly to the ground. Whereas the one from the earlier screenshot actually seems to have another beam beneath it to create that kind of weird H shape. We're nearly at the end of the different block types now, and next up we have got pillars. And I think these are going to be very popular within the community because they are large beams that aren't made of fence posts, which I think is something we've all wanted for quite some time. And they seem to be around about 3 to 4 blocks tall, and they seem to have lots of different textures and flavor editing on them. And what's important as well is that using the model maker, they've actually gone and indented certain parts of it as well to add a bit more shape to the environment. My guess is that by default we're only going to have a couple of these to hand, maybe 2 or 3 tops, and I think people will have to jump into the model maker if they want to make something a bit more elaborate. Now the reason I say that is because typically pillars are really cool to see inside of like palaces, throne rooms, you know, really imposing areas, but I think a single block sort of stretched upwards isn't going to look that great unless you bring the scale of the room downward. So what I would like to see people make inside of the model maker is maybe 2 variants, one being a corner piece and then the other one being kind of like a central piece, I guess. So they take away those little corner textures, they stretch out the grayscale wash across the whole thing, which means you could have pillars then that are massive. You could have pillars that are like 5 by 5, so they're really large and beefy and strong. I just think it would look really cool. I genuinely do. I think there are going to be a lot of people that are going to create a ton of models, and I am wondering to myself, how are we going to share them with one another? Is there going to be some kind of equivalent of the Steam Workshop where you can choose and pick things that you want to have added into your game? Will it be almost like a zip file that you download and put in a directory and it adds it into the game? Or will there be like a native thing where you can download almost like packs? Because I imagine some people, if they're making blocks, are going to be doing them in bulk to make a certain type of look or a certain type of building, and it would be cool if we could share them in mass. I think when I eventually get to sit down with Noxie and talk to him about the game, that is going to be one of the standout questions that I'm going to have for him. So anyway, your fence is up, the kids can't get on your grass, your house is lovely, but there's one more problem: rain. It's getting in, it's dampening your rug, it's horrible, it's a mess. You've got no roof. Let's build one. Now what's really cool about the roof block types is that they don't follow the traditional shapes that you get inside of block-based games. They don't go up, down, left or right. They actually slant at an angle going diagonally across the block. So it seems as though there are going to be a couple of these, but for now we've only been shown 2. The first one is right here. It's the orange tiled rooftop, which for whatever reason just immediately reminds me of Attack on Titan. When Eren and Mikasa and the rest of them are running across the rooftops, this is what I envisage. And then the other roof type, which is typical of RPG and fantasy games, is the straw thatched roof, which we'll get to see a little bit later on. With these roofs as well, it does raise the question for me of how do we decide the collision box with models like this that don't fit that typical square shape? Because I know it's obvious that these roof tiles are going to follow the staircase format, but how do we select that parameter? Is that something that the game figures out for itself based on its shape, or is it a case of we select it within the model maker as a parameter? Because already I'm thinking to myself, it'd be really cool if I could have like a pile of rubble or stones that I put next to a square block, and I'd like it if I could walk up those stones without any issues. So how would I do that? This is obviously a conversation that I guess the Hytale team will have had already, but I would love some clarity on it, because imagine I was to create, say, a pillar or a wooden beam or something like that, something that you could definitely shoot an arrow through in terms of its dimensions, but would the collision box be solid faced even if there was a hole through the center of it? So I know we're going slightly off topic, but we're also kind of not, because we are talking about blocks. But one thing that we haven't been demonstrated yet with the model maker is how we actually create blocks inside of it. We've seen items, we've seen animals, we've seen dogs, we've seen armor, everything like that, but not the actual blocks. Are we going to be allowed to create things outside of that 1x1 block basis? Like, could we create a doorway that was maybe like 4x5 or something like that? I'd really like to know about that. That may throw up some issues when it comes to actually placing the object, but I guess if they just had like a hologram version of it appear before you place it, then there wouldn't be any issues there. But anyway, that's just some more food for thought and where my head is at with things right now. Let's get get back to the decorating, and next up we move on to ivy. And it does look really, really cool. I guess the first questions that spring to mind are, is it going to be climbable like a ladder? Is it going to grow downward by itself? Or can we have an option to basically disable that? Like, could we trim the ivy with some shears or something to stop it from growing? Because there have been so many instances when I've played Minecraft back in the day where I put up some, like, you know, vines for decoration. It looks quite nice and aged and sort of derelict. And then all of a sudden I come back and it's just a bush. Just one massive cousin it, dyed green, and it looks horrific. So from here on out, we just have a few more screenshots of various different builds that the team have created, and how you can see these different blocks sort of playing into one another to make a really nice, humble environment. In this image right here, and beneath it in the caption, there's a cheeky mention that there is quartz used in the fireplace, which is another block type confirmed for Hytale. You can see as well that in the rooftop as well as the fireplace, there's a couple of upside down staircases, which is nice to know how they place. And inside of this image alone, there are just a couple more extra little block types that you might not have seen before. The first one we actually saw in the Model Maker blog post, but if you look over by the doorway, notice how the bottom block behind the chair is actually half planks and then half decorated wood. It's hard to know whether that's a decorated slab and a wooden plank slab, or whether that's just a singular block which actually has that as a variant. Behind the bookcase we can see what looks like either red wool or red clay. Good to know that that's in the game. Atop the fireplace we have got some skulls, and I still don't know how we'll get those. I don't know if those are sort of a decorative item that we have to salvage from a dungeon when we happen to enter one, or whether if we kill enough skeletons and get bones, whether we have a crafting recipe to create decorative pieces of our own. And then I'm not entirely sure what that other thing on the mantelpiece is. It could be either a belt or maybe a headband or a sash. I don't know what it is. And then we move on to probably the most interesting block that I've seen inside of this screenshot. And if you look over by the doorway, of course those are double doors which open really nicely as we've seen previously. But above that, I thought that that was potentially a stone block with some slabs either side of it. But the dimensions compared to the bookcase next to it show that it is one single block. So inside of one single block it's broken up into thirds, and you've got wooden plank, stone and wooden plank, and I think that is going to be a very popular decorative piece. Scrolling down the page and we are met by a 32-second montage of some building being done inside a Hytale and the Emerald Grove in Zone 1. There's just a few little details in here that I wanted to point out because it's nice to have them confirmed. First and foremost, logs can be placed sideways similarly to slabs. Good to know. There's also quite an interesting wall type here as well, which is kind of like that white mesh. I don't really know what the material is in real life, but you know when you go to barns or you go to farms and things like that, and cottages I guess as well, and they have that sort of white mesh in the middle and then you have the wooden beams either side. It's really nice, I love it, and they have that inside of the game. A little further up in the shot as well, you can see that there is a really interesting window type. It's quite a heavily grid wooden window. Wooden window. Wooden window! It's gridded, it looks really cool and really interesting, I like it. Although I can't tell if it actually has any glass in it, that's the one thing I can't discern from this. I've sort of lined up the sky from the other parts of the screenshot, and the colour doesn't seem to be tinted at all, so I'm guessing that it's glassless. On the tower out the back, and we can see a really nice little demonstration of how the roof tiles can work in minimal numbers. You can either have just two of them side by side, or even just one stuck in the corner, and they look great. We move over to this shot with the ivy, and you can see just above the ivy that there are some disgustingly cutesy love heart wooden slabs. Blech. But for real though, they do look quite nice. Just a little point to make about the ivy as well. We discussed it a moment ago, but it does seem as though potentially there are two types of ivy that you can place. There is the one that kind of covers a 2-block span and seems really flat with the wall, and then there's another type that actually protrudes from the wall a little bit. I had thought originally that maybe once you place a certain amount of ivy, then it starts to sprout out, but it actually doesn't seem to match up numbers wise, so the mechanic doesn't seem, you know, consistent. It'd be really cool if one of them actually grows and the other one doesn't, so we have that mixture to work with. Probably quite important to note as well that we do have a tiny windowsill that we can craft ourselves. Just a very small minimal ledge that just adds a little bit more emphasis and embossment from the building. I really like it. And then of course we finally get a look at the thatched roof, and honestly its colour is very, very vivid. It's very bright, which works just fine in the Emerald Grove, but I imagine in areas like the Devastated Lands or Borea it's going to be a bit of an eyesore. But there is every chance that you can maybe dye it a different colour, or maybe the colours won't be quite as intense if there's enough fog and ambient lighting in the area. Beneath some of the windows as well, we can see that there's a unique block type in the form of a plant pot. Aww. And then as we pan out from the house to see our creation completed, you might have missed the really angry looking dude in the window. How does a guy that grumpy live in such a cute home? Oh, and just one more detail that I noticed. If you look at the tower and go all the way to the top and stop just before the window, you'll notice that each block there seems to have 2 beams, very small ones, sticking out from each top corner. And originally I thought, okay, that's fine, beams can be different sizes, they can sit in different parts of the block, but then it seems as though from the side angle on the right hand side, it seems like there's actually like 2 planks lining on the opposite direction on top of them. So it almost works as a very janky looking makeshift ledge. I wouldn't dare walk on it, but it looks nice. So there we have it. That's everything shown off in the building blocks blog post. To wrap things out, they've got 3 demonstration pieces for us from the Hytale development team. The first is called The Lonely Castle, and it's created by Radan, which looks wonderfully eerie thanks to all the ambient fog and lighting inside of the game. And you can see that the glow from those windows looks really, really inviting. Beneath that, we have got the Citadel, also again by Radan, which is actually humongous. Like it's stupidly huge. And I'm really digging this crane design in the middle. That looks awesome. Really far off to the right hand side as well, and you can see some kind of like bars, whether they're iron or not is undetermined, but you can see it's forming a proper gate for the castle entrance. And then across this build for lighting, they've opted away from torches and instead gone for lanterns, which is a nice confirmation of those in the game. And wait, hold on. Is that a giant lion head? I'm going to need to see that from another angle, please. Then the absolute final piece in the whole blog post comes from Captain Charles, and this is known as the Palace, which has some really nice Eastern flavours thrown in there, where you get to see a couple more colour variants. Just on the underside of the lip of the roof, you can see that we've got some nice orange versions of the stone blocks from earlier. Whilst we're focusing on the rooftop as well, you can see those slanted tiles are back, but this time they're a much darker colour and they actually have a lighter underbelly. And then right there in the centre, my favourite tree of all, the Sakura cherry blossom tree. I love it. I really hope that this tree actually has the petals falling from it in a really majestic fashion. Walking through an entire forest of those, I'm in. I had thought for a moment that maybe this is just a regular tree and they've just used like, you know, the RGB sliders to crank up the paint colour in there. But if you have a little look on the inside of the logs, you can see that they also have that same tint to them. So this probably is a real Sakura prefab. So there we go. That's a look at all of the new information regarding building blocks inside of Hytale. Remember, these updates get posted on their website once a week, so there's another brand new Hytale video coming from me very, very soon. If you don't want to miss it, go ahead and subscribe, ring that bell so you get notified of when it goes out. And just a quick thank you to people in the comment section. You've now let me know that Zone 3 is called Borea, and that one's now stuck in my noggin. And speaking of the comment section, I've got a question for you. What type of block have you not seen yet in these blog posts that you would love included in Hytale? Let me know in the comment section below. I look forward to reading all of those, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.